Hey, Catechism volunteers, our next session is on Lent. Ready or not, here comes Lent, right? It's hard to believe we're at that part in the year already, but here we are. These sessions will be immediately before Ash Wednesday, so it's a good preparation time for us personally and for our kiddos to try to get ready for Lent, for these 40-day track meet, if you will, focused on prayer and fasting and almsgiving. So that's kind of what the lessons are going to focus on. What are those disciplines? How do they work for kids? What kind of plan can those kids come up with for their Lenten activities? And it's good to encourage us. Sometimes we fall into this trap, adults as well as kids. We fall into this trap of the idea of Lenten practice is either to punish ourselves because Jesus died for us, or to try to earn God's favor and God's love and God's grace and all that sort of stuff, right? And both of those extremes are wrong. We're not punishing ourselves. We're denying ourselves to grow in the ability, right? You have to have self-control in order to give yourself away, which is what love is. So if you have no control over yourself, you can't actually love. And so that's what these practices of denying ourselves are about. Maybe there's an aspect of trying to participate in Jesus' suffering somehow, but we don't want to go into like a masochistic mindset for Lent, right? So we're trying to grow in self-control. And we're also, at the same time, not trying to earn God's love, because we can't. There's literally nothing you can do to make God love you more or love you less. That's not what these practices are about, right? And it's God's grace that is going to make these practices fruitful, and our response to that's going to make those fruitful, right? And so it's not like if I do something hard enough and strong enough, God's going to love me more. That's not the point, right? The point is, this is a time of intense focus for the church to try to grow in self-discipline so that we can love better, modeled after Jesus' self-sacrifice on the cross, right? And so that's kind of what Lent is. So what are we doing for these activities? Every kiddo is going to get one of these Lenten calendars with a little suggestion for each day in Lent. Some of them will be more practical than others, some won't. This might just be their Lenten plan. Maybe that's what they have to do for Lent this year. It's okay, we don't have to give up the same thing every day in Lent. We don't have to do the same thing every day in Lent. It's okay for it to change, take it week by week, take it day by day. But this will help them kind of plod the way through Lent as we approach Easter. For our youngest kiddos, we've got resurrection eggs in the lesson plans. If you're not familiar with resurrection eggs, they're little plastic eggs. Each egg has something in it. They're essentially stations of the cross, right? Each egg has something in it that tells the story of Jesus' sacrifice, specifically in Holy Week. Different egg sets will have different themes. Some of them will go more through Lent than through Holy Week, but they're fairly obvious what those are for. The eggs also come with these little books. You don't have to follow the book, but it does give you a little script to read and suggest what that thing is for. But it could also just be a fruitful class discussion, what you know of Jesus's, the story of Lent and Holy Week. Why do you think there's a crown of thorns in here? Why do you think there's a whip? Why do you think there's a coin? So that's the first activity for little ones. A bunch of our grades, kindergarten through, I believe it's all grades, we've got a Lenten matchup. Very similar to a lot of other activities that we have. It's a description of those Lenten disciplines, a phrase that might have to do with the Lenten discipline, and a picture of a Lenten discipline. And so the idea is to put those things together to try to reinforce in their minds these three different areas of prayer and fasting and almsgiving. And then for our littlest ones, kindergarten and first grade, we've got a prayer sandwich, which kind of helps them learn some of the basics of prayer. How do you structure a prayer, right? You begin with the sign of the cross, you end with the sign of the cross, that's the bread. And then the fillings are a bunch of different things you could say in prayer, right? I thank you for, I praise you for, I'm in need of, I'm worried about, and lots of different things. So nice little visual for little ones to figure out how do you build a prayer. If I want to focus more on praying in Lent, what does that even mean? What's a way of doing that? So that prayer sandwich is going to show up in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade as well. And then beginning in second grade and going up through 8th grade, we've got my plan for Lent. Right, so as you're talking about Lenten practices and what those might look like for a student, they can make a plan for each day. I will pray for this. I will fast by doing this. A Bible verse to memorize. I'll give alms by doing this. On Sundays, which are Little Easters, I'm going to celebrate by doing what? That might open up the debate. If you give up candy for Lent, are you allowed to have it on Sunday? The general answer is Sundays are Little Easters. They're not days of penance. They're not days of fasting, so you don't have to. But if your parents tell you to, then you have to, right? So there's that. So the Lenten plan. And then once we get up into the older grades, grades 4 and up, We're suggesting doing Stations of the Cross. You can certainly do that with younger ones as well to try to introduce them to this devotion, whether or not you go into the church and pray with the actual stations, or if you just utilize pictures that we have of stations and a little kid-friendly Stations of the Cross prayer that just has like a one-line thing for each station. There are 14 stations. If it takes you a minute for each one, that's going to take you 15 minutes to get through. You could also pace yourself, right? You could do Stations of the Cross throughout Lent and maybe just do 3 or 4 stations in this first session, and the next session do the next 3 or 4 stations. However you think it's appropriate, whatever you think you can do in the time that you have. So that's what we've got for this Lenten session. As always, let us know how these activities work, what you think of these, because we'd love to improve upon this for next year.